Sir, with respect, what we don't need is someone's grandfather shuffling through my armory with a grease pencil and 40-year-old instincts. 24 rifles, 72 hours until they shipped to Helmand with the Marines who would carry them. 3 days of failed diagnostics on a $47,000 system that had never been wrong before. Then, a 79-year-old man walked in with a cane and a grease pencil. The staff sergeant on duty looked at the cane, turned to the warrant officer beside him, and said the words he would spend the rest of the morning regretting. Sir, with respect, what we don't need is someone's grandfather shuffling through my armory with a grease pencil and 40-year-old instincts. Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, Georgia, a Thursday morning in October. The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Ryan Cord, said just loud enough to carry across the inspection bench where 24 M14 enhanced battle rifles lay in a row, every one of them passing every test, every one of them failing in the field. The old man's name was Leonard Foss. Faded olive USMC ball cap with no embroidery left on it, dark gray canvas work jacket with a graphite smudge along the lower seam of the right chest pocket. He had heard. He gave no sign of it. He stood the way a hammer stands at half-cock, held by a small thing, perfectly still, ready. Then he walked to the bench, picked up the first rifle, closed his eyes, worked the charging handle 3 times slowly, completely, the way a man listens to something rather than operates it. 90 minutes later, 7 of those rifles would bear a small graphite circle above the gas port. The staff sergeant would not be looking at the screen anymore. 40-year-old instincts had been cycling rifles by hand since before the staff sergeant was born. They were about to find what 3 days of measurements had missed. If you believe a man's hands can know what a machine cannot, type Mark in the comments right now. The armory smelled the way armories have smelled since 1962, CLP and solvent and the metallic edge of recently fired brass. Fluorescent lights ran in long parallel lines across the ceiling, picking out the steel inspection tables, the wheeled tool cabinets, the row of 24 M14 enhanced battle rifles laid muzzle up on the bench. Outside the high windows, a Georgia October morning was warming toward 85 degrees. Inside, the industrial air conditioning ran the kind of low hum that lives under everything else. This was Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, 600 acres of warehouses, repair bays, and weapons maintenance facility serving the Atlantic Marine Forces. The armory was the last room a rifle entered before it shipped to a man who would carry it. Everyone who worked there understood that. Cord understood it more than most. His Pelican cases were lined up on the long table behind him, 6 of them. Foam cutouts shaped each tool, digital calipers, electronic headspace gauges, a borescope with a tablet display, a digital torque wrench, and on its own wheeled cart, the SPAR 16, the $47,000 diagnostic platform he was the only certified operator on the base for. 211 weapons in 8 years, 2 deployments in Afghanistan. He could call gas port spec from memory, and he was calling it now measurements, tolerances, carrier velocity curve to the warrant officer beside him in the tight, precise voice of a man who'd been awake for 31 hours. I've run the borescope twice on every rifle in that lot, sir. I've run the SPAR on every one of them. Headspace within, 2, gas port within spec, timing nominal, carrier velocity inside the curve. There is nothing wrong with these rifles. The simulator is wrong, or the ammunition is wrong, or he stopped because he saw, out of the corner of his eye, Captain Strand walking a man into the armory. A cane, a canvas jacket, a faded ball cap with nothing on it. Cord's eyes went to the cane and then away. He turned back to the warrant officer, voice dropped half a step but not all the way. Sir, with respect, I've got Marines staging in 3 days. I don't have time for the museum tour. The warrant officer did not answer. The warrant officer was watching the old man walk to the bench. Leonard Foss did not look at Cord, did not look at the SPAR 16, did not look at the Pelican cases or the rows of measurements still on the screen. He set his cane against the leg of the inspection bench, took a steel coffee thermos from the inside pocket of his canvas jacket, and placed it on the corner of the bench, exactly square with the edge. Took the grease pencil from his right chest pocket and laid it beside the thermos. Then he stood there with his hands at his sides, looking at the rifles the way a man looks at 24 old friends he has not seen in a while. He had not said a word. He had claimed the bench. The warrant officer cleared his throat. Master Sergeant Foss, I'm Chief Warrant Officer Hollies. I appreciate you driving up. We have run every diagnostic in the manual on these. The SPAR 16 is reading every one of them inside spec. We are out of ideas. Len's eyes did not leave the rifles. May I see your test fire log? Cord answered before Hollies could. We didn't bench fire them. Manual lists HBAR diagnostic as the qualifying instrument for cycling assessment in maintenance condition. Bench firing 24 rifles costs 800 rounds of 7.62. We don't have to spare. Len did not turn around. What conditions did you run the SPAR at, sir? Temperature. What was the room at when you ran the SPAR? A pause. Cord glanced at the warrant officer. 68 to 70. Climate control runs that range. The SPAR is calibrated for room temperature. Len nodded once, confirmation, not discovery. He picked up the first rifle, set the buttstock against his right hip, tipped the muzzle up. With the two curled fingers of his left hand, he reached around and felt, just felt, the underside of the gas cylinder behind the front sight assembly, where the metal sat closest to where the propellant gas turned 90 degrees on its way to the operating rod. Held his fingers there for the count of 3, then set the rifle back on the bench. Cord watched. The two curled fingers were the kind of detail he noticed and then made himself stop noticing. They've been bench fired before, Len said. When? Pre-deployment qualification at the range last week. 3 days before you started running diagnostics. Yes, cold rifles, cold receivers, 3-day rest. You measured them cold. Cord's voice tightened. Master Sergeant, with respect, the SPAR is not affected by Captain. Len had not raised his voice. He turned finally to Strand. How many Marines on this manifest? 24, Master Sergeant. Sergeant Krause's platoon wheels up Sunday. What's their AO? Hellman follow-on. Daytime ground temperatures 43 degrees C, 110 degrees F. Len heard the number without surprise. He had been waiting on it. A second warrant officer came through the side door with a clipboard and stopped when he registered the configuration of the room. The old man at the bench, the silent armorer, the captain. He read the air. He did not speak. Hollies addressed the room generally. Master Sergeant Foss has the bench. Len picked up the second rifle. He did not look at the SPAR 16. He did not look at Cord. He closed his eyes and worked the charging handle once, slow, and held it at full rearward travel for a moment that lasted longer than it should have, the way a man holds a single note to hear what the room does with it. Then he let it ride forward under spring tension. He listened to the carrier come home. Something in his face changed by exactly 1 degree. He set the rifle aside and picked up the third. The second rifle joined the first at the back of the bench. He picked up the third charging handle, slow, listened, set it aside. He worked through the rifles the way a man walks a fence line he built himself, without hurry, without doubt, touching each post once. He did not use the SPAR 16. He did not use the calipers. He did not use the borescope. He used his hands and his ears, and on 3 of the rifles he used the 2 curled fingers of his left hand to feel the gas cylinder one more time before he cycled the bolt. Each time he held the rifle the same way. Each time he listened to the carrier come home through 1 full cycle. Each time he either set the rifle on the back of the bench or twice in the first 7, he picked up the grease pencil. A small graphite circle above the gas port the size of a thumbnail, neat as a stamp. Cord watched. Rifle 8 set aside clean. Rifle 9 set aside clean. Rifle 10 pencil circle. Rifle 11 set aside clean. Rifle 12 pencil circle. The second warrant officer set his clipboard down without looking at it. Rifle 14 circle. Rifle 19 circle. Rifle 23 circle. The last rifle he set down at 9:02. He put the grease pencil back in his right chest pocket. The thermos went back in the inside jacket pocket. He picked up his cane. 7 rifles bore a graphite mark above the gas port. The other 17 sat clean. Captain Strand spoke first. Master Sergeant, those 7 have gas ports running 2 to 3 thousandths undersized. You won't see it on a static gauge at 68 degrees. You'll see it when the receiver heats under sustained fire and the tolerance stack closes. In Hellman's Sun, you'll see it inside the first magazine. He looked at Cord for the first time, not unkind, direct. Your equipment measured correctly, it just measured the wrong condition. He turned to Hollies. I'd suggest a hot fire test. Bring the Mark 7 up to 110 internal. Run 30 rounds rapid each. Log the cycling. The other 17 will run. The 7 will short stroke before 20. Hollies was already moving toward the door. Cord did not move. He stood beside the spar 16 with one hand on the cart. His thumb pressed against the corner of the cart hard enough to whiten the nail. His eyes went from the 7 rifles to the screen and back again. His jaw worked once. He did not speak. He did not look at the warrant officer. He did not look at the captain. He looked at the 7 graphite circles and then at his own equipment in that order 3 times. 40 minutes later, the test base sent up its result. All 7 of the marked rifles failed to fully cycle inside 30 rounds of sustained fire at elevated temperature. The 17 unmarked rifles ran clean. The armory was the kind of quiet that happens when a room full of men who measure things for a living realizes a man without any instruments has just measured them. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause for it. Cord crossed the floor. He did not move like a man who'd been awake 31 hours anymore. He moved like a man who'd been told something he could not put down. He stopped at the back of the bench 2 feet from Len and waited until Len looked up. "Master Sergeant," he said. "When you walked in this morning, I said something about a grease pencil and 40-year-old instincts. I'm not taking it back because of what you found. I'm taking it back because I should not have said it before you found anything." Len looked at him. The 2 curled fingers of his left hand rested on the edge of the bench. "You were trying to get 24 men's rifles right before Sunday, Staff Sergeant. There are worse sins than being short-tempered about it." His hand closed around the cane. Cord said, "Could you teach this?" The hand cycling, the listening. "I can teach you to listen for it. I can't give you the years. The 2 aren't the same thing, but the first one is enough of a start." Captain Strand walked Len to the door. Outside the sliding bay, a Ford F-250 sat in the morning sun. Manual transmission, 180,000 mi, kept the way Len kept every rifle on his rack. Strand stopped at the threshold. "Master Sergeant Voss." Len waited. Was the sling swivel really loose? Len did not answer right away. The morning light was coming sideways through the bay door, catching the edge of the captain's nameplate. Strand. He had seen it when he walked in. He had not asked. He had not needed to. Len turned. He looked at the captain's face the way a man looks at a face he has seen before in a different decade, in a different climate, in the dark. "Tell your father," Len said. I tightened it before he stepped off. The captain's mouth opened and then closed. His right hand came up to the brim of his cover. He held the salute for a full count of 3. Len returned it slowly, precisely, the way he had returned every salute that mattered for 60 years. Then he walked out into the heat. A machine measures what it was built to find. Your hands and ears measure what's left. The first list is not the complete one. The men we tell stories about on this channel rarely ask to be remembered. They asked only that the work be done right and that the men coming up behind them be taught to listen before they were taught to measure. If you want more stories of veterans whose hands knew what no instrument could read, subscribe, and in the comments tell us about a man like Leonard Voss in your own family. Tell us about the one who knew the sound of clean steel and marked the dirty ones. Len Voss drove south on Highway 19 toward Tifton with the windows down and the radio off and the grease pencil he'd carried since 1966 in the right chest pocket of his canvas jacket, where it had lived every day of his working life. He had not turned the radio on in 7 years.